I'm not really convinced that it is as decentralized as it kind of promotes itself to be. I think in most cases there's, a party that is behind whatever, project we're talking about. So I haven't really come across a DeFi project that isn't basically a company that is just, operating in the sort of DeFi space. I wouldn't really trust them. I have zero money in the DeFi space.
Hi, assalamu alaikum everyone. Hello and welcome to TakaTalks. Today we have with us Rakaan Kayali. Am I saying your name right?
Yes, correct.
Excellent. So Rakaan Kayali is a distinguished authority in halal-conscious investing, empowering tens of thousands of Muslims through his tech and research-driven platform, Practical Islamic Finance. So I know him as the guy on YouTube who's talking about halal investing. With a commitment to aligning investments with Islamic values, Rakan has created tools that enable smarter, effortless investing in the halal market. In 2009, his groundbreaking research on Islamic finance won the first place at the Denman Research Competition. Congratulations for that. His
Thank
accolades
you.
continued with the founding of a successful alternative investment fund in 2019, where 100% of his investments have thrived. But Rakan's mission extends beyond investment guidance. As the creator of the course Master Halal Investing, he teaches others how to fish for outstanding halal companies independently. So do it yourself. This education, coupled with his PIF membership service, forms the core of his innovative approach to halal investing. He is a chartered financial analyst and a distinguished graduate with distinction in finance from the Ohio State University. Rakan's blend of expertise, passion, and innovation positions him as a leading figure for halal-conscious investors seeking both profitability and integrity. And this is why we have him on today. So I would like to now give you the floor and please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that very kind intro. Yeah, as you mentioned, I guess if I wanted to add something that wasn't mentioned in the intro, I have sort of a dual background, having lived 10 years of my life, my early childhood in Syria, and after having been born in the United States and living the first 10 years of my life in the United States, my parents took us back to Syria in order for us to learn more about Islam and learn Arabic. And then I came back to the United States freshman year of college. So my mission really is to try and empower Muslims to make smarter investment decisions, smarter financial decisions that are halal conscious. And that requires obviously understanding the first principles of Islamic finance and halal investing. And that's really where I started. And then building off of that into conclusions that can be made about things like crypto, like other sort of bleeding edge technologies that Muslims encounter. So that's really been the dedication of my adult life. And yeah.
Thank you for that. I think you've moved very recently, right, from the US to Turkey. And
It's a
what
temporary
prompted that
move.
move?
Yeah, so I moved to
Okay.
Turkey in order to immerse myself in a Muslim majority country. And, it was becoming increasingly difficult to separate oneself in the West from some of the things that are going on, especially with regards to social issues, such as, LGBTQ, the rest of the letters. Since I had a son a little over a year ago, I've been thinking about, okay, once my son gets into first grade, I'm not really sure I'm comfortable with him going to school here in the United States. Let me see if there are any other countries that perhaps uh, can be potential places where I settle down for at least temporarily in order to have my son go to a school where I'm comfortable with him learning in. And so that's what brought me to Turkey. And it's really a scouting mission, basically, to see if this is a country that perhaps I can later come to and settle in.
Well, you have an open invitation to join us here in Saudi Arabia. So anytime you
Okay,
pop
well,
into
I
Riyadh,
appreciate that.
you are our guest, you and your family.
Well, thank you.
Okay. All right. So you mentioned actually something interesting. You said you wanted to help people make good decisions or help Muslims make better decisions about their finances. And you talk about crypto as sort of the bleeding edge of technology. And finances, and particularly Islamic finance, is anything but uh, innovative, if you ask me. So, where do you see why crypto, and how did you get into it, and why do you think it's important to be going towards where the innovation is?
Well, I think there's some merit to decentralization, right? And that's, I think, the perhaps the most appealing aspect of cryptocurrencies. Some cryptocurrencies, I should qualify. What has become clear is that when you have centralized issuance of especially money, then this is subject to the self-interests of the people that are issuing the money. Therefore, a superior system is one where the issuance is not subject to those self-interests. And crypto provides one solution that goes in that direction. And I should qualify this again by saying not all crypto. So a lot of crypto, I would say the majority of it, is just scams, right? That are centralized and taking advantage of the lack of regulation in the space in order to, enrich the founders of whatever cryptocurrency is being issued. There are some other cryptocurrencies which actually have legitimate use cases. Obviously, the most famous of which being Bitcoin. But I'm not a Bitcoin maxi. I don't think that's where things stop. I think there's room for other cryptocurrencies to provide value. But I just want to emphasize the point that cryptocurrencies in general so far have had very little utility, real world utility, other than just the means of speculation. That said,
You're
their
gonna get me started now. But go
yeah,
ahead.
their current form is not necessarily indicative of their final form. And I do believe that they can evolve into something a lot more useful than what they are now. And therefore, it's important for Muslims not to simply dismiss the entire space because the early experiments have been not that impressive in terms of their utility. Rather, I think it's important for Muslims to actually engage in the space and actually help with reforming it in a way where it becomes more useful. So yeah, that's really what motivated me to delve into the world of cryptocurrencies and try and provide at least my 2 cents in terms of how Muslims can approach it in a way that's halal conscious.
Very cool. So I want to push back on this notion that crypto has no sort of real world utility. We actually spoke very recently to two different people, one from Venezuela, one from Lebanon. And the
Mhm.
truth of the matter is crypto was like the light in darkness when everything failed. So these are, economies where inflation and hyperinflation happened. And at some point there was no usable money. Right. So in Venezuela, they kept reducing the number of zeros in their
Yeah.
currency because it got so inflated. Right. At one point, they reduced it to 14, zeros. So cryptocurrency in that sense was able to allow the economy to continue to function because buying US dollars was illegal. Um, it just, there was no usable money. So they actually had to create their own medium of exchange again. And I think that is when crypto became extremely utilitarian.
I think
Having
we
said
may be
that, okay,
conflating
please
Bitcoin
respond.
and cryptocurrency. Bitcoin, yes, I do think it has use, but there's more than 10,000 cryptocurrencies right now.
The case in Venezuela, they actually used something called Dash, which was one of those altcoins. In
Sure.
Lebanon, it's USDC and USDT, which are the stable coins. So absolutely, but Bitcoin is too volatile, so it wasn't a practical way of as a medium of exchange. So this is what happened in those countries.
Sure. So, yeah, I mean, again, I would say it's probably not just Bitcoin. Perhaps there's like a smaller percentage, but I would contend that the majority of the 10,000 projects are not really of utility.
Yeah.
Things like stable coins and some proof of work projects, I think, have had more utility. But no, and that's really why I think that crypto is an area where Muslims should be involved in, is that there is potential here. Like, it's not destined to stay in its current state. I think there's a lot of benefit that can be had from cryptocurrency, to your point, and the point that the people you spoke with were mentioning.
Yeah, so I think Murad and I, we've had this conversation, and I'm going to let him tell us his point of view. But as
Yeah.
Muslims, we were always previously leaders in technological and social innovation, and really what has happened to us.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting. As you mentioned, I was exposed with, I would say, blockchain and crypto back then when I first started my first venture 10 years ago. So I was back in 2014, 2013. Yeah. And people were building on the blockchain. And I was like, okay, I was building my own venture. So I was so busy looking at what I was doing. And I didn't have much. I was building my own venture. I didn't have much time to dig into this technology. Eventually, we exited our startup like a year and a half ago. Okay, we were in Web2, so I decided to start investing in some startup, looking at what was the technology, a new technology into the space and everything, and helping founders fundraise and so on and so forth. Eventually, I start looking at a way to invest some of the money as well. I start looking deeply into Bitcoin in particular and few other currency, Ethereum and stuff like that. And as you mentioned, I was really trying to stay away from anything that was questionable. So, hence your video were very helpful actually. And I was kind of very hearing a lot of back flash on a lot of Muslim. What are you buying Bitcoin? This is the money of shaitan. You name it. I had it all. I had to. They used to send me video about how bad is cryptocurrency and even particularly Bitcoin. They were really against me. So I was like always going back to talab al-ilm, exposing them, uh, you know, with the value. And for me, I didn't see anything inherently bad, especially on the white paper. And I was like, why are we against in that principle technology? Because for me, blockchain is a good thing to have. Bitcoin is a use case for the blockchain. Convince me otherwise. That is bad. And all the argument they had against, actually, particularly for this cryptocurrency, they were not making sense. Like they were afraid of that it was a money laundering scheme. It was a single owner. I even got the CIA behind it, controlling the Bitcoin. So debug a little bit all these myths for me and tell me, when did you started yourself being really involved into cryptocurrency and blockchain? That would be a good help for the audience here.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't. I mean, my involvement with cryptocurrency is much more limited than yours, perhaps. And my involvement is mainly as an investor and a commenter on it from a Sharia perspective. It's one of those things where there's a lot of misinformation about it. And as you mentioned, a lot of very weak arguments that argue for the prohibition of it as an asset class. And so, when I hear a weak argument about something involved in halal investing or Islamic finance, I just have to respond. I can't help myself. So that's what really pulled me into the space. I think it was perhaps 2018 when I first I made a video about Bitcoin and how I thought it was permissible after seeing a number of well-known commenters on YouTube say otherwise, and it just kind of started, I guess,
So you
my
jumped
journey.
headfirst into the
Yeah.
controversy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do have a habit of doing that actually. When I see, it is sort of enjoyable to me to actually tackle arguments that I find to be wrong, and try and see if I can show without a shadow of a doubt that the alternative is actually correct. It's an exercise that I like to do. It's my pastime.
You're very good at it, by the way.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
And those are the fun videos to watch as well. That's actually a very good, a very interesting point, because there's a lot of controversy in Islamic finance in general, right? So there's that group of people who are like, Islamic banking, there's nothing Islamic about it. It's all just marketing. It's all just, you're dealing with regular banks anyways. And then Islamic projects, Islamic fintech projects, there's also nothing Islamic about it. They're just marketing ploys for trying to market to Muslims. So I'm thinking things like halal water here, it always gets me when I go to places like Malaysia and Indonesia, and I look at the bottle of water and there's a halal logo on it. I'm like, what? Where's the haram water? Anyway, so what are your thoughts on this controversy and this I guess dissension that's in the Islamic finance ranks today?
I think actually the truth is quite clear for people who are actually familiar with what is going on. In terms of Islamic banks, I haven't encountered one that I would say is deserving of the word Islamic. I think most Islamic financing schemes were not well thought out, and in fact just disguise riba by calling it different names. I think there's a whole industry of sukuk, for example, that I think it's a good idea. The idea of giving a share into a stream of cash flows is a really good idea, but the implementation is clearly wrong in terms of its avoidance of interest-bearing debt, or lack thereof, I should say. So I think it's actually quite clear. It's only controversial for people who aren't really familiar with what's going on. And I think if you asked most fair-minded people, is this different from interest-bearing debt? After you explain the product to them, they'll come to the same conclusion, which is that no, it's not. Unfortunately, though, what has happened, what has caused this industry to survive as long as it has without any major reformation, is you have YouTube personalities actually justifying it, promoting it, and other public personalities promoting it. And then you have the issue of mashayikh that are sort of on the Sharia boards of these companies that give it further legitimacy by providing their imprimatur on the products that the company is issuing, which itself is a conflict of interest, because the Sharia board is paid by the company that the Sharia board is meant to regulate. So you have the regulated paying the regulator, which is a clear conflict of interest. And then finally, you have consumers who would rather just not make a judgment themselves and just sort of offshore their duty to think to the Sharia board and say, oh, well, the Sharia board approved it, so I'm not even gonna, investigate it at all. And so these elements together end up sort of perpetuating these products that are frankly embarrassing to Muslims. Because when a non-Muslim sees them, they're like, and I've experienced this firsthand. They're like, well, this religion is not serious. Either these people are ignorant, unfortunately, or they're trying to play games with their religion, with with God, basically. So it's an important thing to tackle, and it's an issue that I've really dedicated the majority of my adult life to.
Thanks for this point of view, Rakan. What I see a lot when we try to actually tackle the question, you have to go at the root of it. Even when we question, I always have this in mind: is that when Muslim actually even using fiat currency, they are participating close or far or even into the ribawi system
Yeah.
of the monetary system itself. I remember 25 years ago when I was in the US, I was already questioning the Federal Reserve and why are they holding this currency? Why is it that the US government is allowing a private company to print money for them when they can do it themselves? Already, I was already people looking at me like, are you crazy? The Federal Reserve belongs to the government. And most of Americans were unaware of that, but now has changed ever since. But when we go back as Muslim, of course, we actually just have no choice basically, and we have been imposed on everything has been imposed on us using the fiat currency, and we're actually not promoting it only, but suffering from that, because as you know, if we own fiat currency, we are not allowed to collect interest for most of the time. Some of the people who put even their money into non-Sharia compliance bank, they refuse to collect the interest that is paid off for them. So at the end of the year, they are not only losing on the devaluation of their currency, but they are also losing on the interest rate that is given to them, that just benefit the non-Muslim actually only. So it's like when we go, we see that we're not facing a small tsunami, but more than that, it's massive. So when we question all that, we go back to the fundamental of even using this fiat currency. And when I go back to the scholars, of course, they say like, the maslaha, of the what is better for the ummah is not to be behind and use whatever we have to use in order not to make the masses suffer from the use or non-use of conventional or banking and stuff like that, and using this mode of payment. So yeah, so it's not an easy topic to even tackle easily. I mean, it is a lot of blockers. So even before going into the banking system, it's just the money that we're using. So what's your take on that? I mean, if you can share.
Yeah, I mean, the currency is a big problem. It's created through debt all around the world, and interest-bearing debt is forbidden in Islam, and this it creates a lot of practical problems for economies globally, and so I think cryptocurrency is one of those solutions that has promise. It carries some promise. So cryptocurrencies provide a solution to this, and I think specifically proof of work cryptocurrencies, where the issuance of the token is not based on that. It's based on some amount of computational work being done. So I really think that because of the religious motivation, in addition to the practical motivation that we should have to find a substitute, Muslims especially should be motivated to develop this cryptocurrency space and make our currency for the first time in hundreds of years devoid of corruption and manipulation by a few. I really think that this unchecked printing of money and the consequent deflation of people's savings, inflation of people's savings and loss of purchasing power that people are experiencing. And it hits the poor more than the rich, because the rich typically have the majority of their wealth in assets that appreciate in price. Tackling this, solving this issue is, I think, cryptocurrency provides a way for us to do this, and therefore it should be something that we prioritize as Muslims. developing. Unfortunately, though, I have, the majority of the projects that I've seen in the space that are sort of Muslim branded, in my assessment, are simply trying to monetize the word Islamic, or monetize the halal consciousness of Muslims through cryptocurrency, and really haven't focused on, okay, what is the unique utility that this project is going to provide that no other project provides? I really haven't seen that, and that question being answered. All I've seen is a bunch of variations of the same thing, which is that, oh, look, our blockchain is halal, or our cryptocurrency is halal, which basically means nothing, because a blockchain is just a distributed ledger, and you know what do you mean by, you say your distributed ledger is halal? What does that even mean? And then my token is halal. What does that even mean? It's just, I think it just confuses people who aren't familiar with blockchain or tokens or what this whole cryptocurrency is about. And it sucks in people, if we want to be frank, that are just interested in cryptocurrency from the perspective of it's a way to speculate on price. It's an easy way to speculate on price. It's something to do on your phone, right? It's exciting. It's akin to gambling, basically. I was speaking with another person that wanted me to promote their project, and they were like, "Oh yeah, well, a lot of Muslim women are coming to me, and they're like, is this halal? Can we trade it on our phones or whatever?" And so another aspect of this cryptocurrency is that it's empowering Muslim women. And I was like, come on, man, give me a break. You're not empowering anything. You're providing a vehicle for these women to trade on their phones, and basically a way for them to be entertained. This isn't empowering anything. There's no practical use here. So that's another thing that I think is kind of disappointing about the Muslim entrepreneurship in this space. One thing that occurred to me, and as it relates to the blockchain, and one of the use is that Muslims could really look into is because of the sort of basically, if you think about it, the first blockchain was perhaps the Quran, wherein you had different people who had memorized it, and they were validating what other people were saying. So you had that, but what we don't have basically is I guess as strong a version for the hadith, right? So maybe we could create like a blockchain for hadith, and basically any and it would be really simple for us to ascertain whether a hadith was authentic or not, based on the how many
chain of narration as well.
The trend of narration, and have that in a way where it's sort of maintained globally, and it's globally sort of supervised by Muslims in a decentralized fashion. Why not do that? That seems like a really low-hanging fruit that Muslims could try and tackle. So I'm looking forward to hearing sort of innovative ideas like that about cryptocurrencies and as it relates to Muslims.
Yeah, I think you made a very good point here. It's like, Alhamdulillah, we have an amazing community that works actually for the top company in the world. But I just came back, for example, from Singapore, and I was meeting with the Muslim community there, and some of the leaders, and some of the entrepreneur, and also I would say the upper middle class from the Muslim community. And even there, the entrepreneurship skill was not in their mind. So it was like 1 or 2% of the community, in the Muslim community, being willing to become an entrepreneur or run their own business from whatever, from bacala to a startup, doesn't matter. But they were like more inclined in doing, working for the state, comfortable jobs, not worry too much about taking risk and so on and so forth. And you're talking about the most advanced nation in the world, and the Muslim community there being on the back seat and letting the other communities actually building the top startup, top company, and bringing value back to their own community. So us as a Muslim entrepreneur, likewise, we're in the Middle East, and actually, 5, 6, 7 years ago, even in Saudi Arabia, even though we see most of the family coming from, the big families here are entrepreneurial families. They made their fortune themselves by building the like of Al Majid Al Futem, Al Majdu'i Group, Al Suleiman Group, all those families. You see, it was very difficult actually to see young Muslim entrepreneur 5 years ago who were willing to jump into the entrepreneurship wagon and to build company, to build value. They're like, what do you want to do next? I got a job lined up for me at the government level. And most of the Muslim country, the biggest employers of those countries are actually the government.
Right.
So it was not incentivized. Even a local Emirati, for example, would not build his own startup when he can have a 40,000 riyal salary joining any kind of government job. Likewise in Saudi Arabia, it was, but in the past 5, 6 years, things have changed. I see a bunch of entrepreneurs stepping in and stuff like that. So what I want to say is, like, what's kind of funny is that this phenomenon of finally Muslim getting into the space, building company that are going to benefit not only themselves but the community at large is starting to happen. And in the Middle East, we build Sharia compliance from day one. So when the guys wake up in the morning, build a company, he doesn't even think twice. It's not like being in the West. Should I do that or not? He's like, okay, I'm building it right in a way that should be acceptable to my culture, my family, so it's from day one. So they don't emphasize, hey, I'm doing something Sharia compliance. When I first built my e-commerce platform, I didn't say Sharia compliance e-commerce platform. I was in Middle East. I said, use it. You will not see drugs. You will not see bad cigarette being sold, whatever. That was not permitted in my platform. But what I want to say is that the community now is growing. There's more founders trying to tackle issue, quitting the Apple job, Google job, Facebook job, trying to build something finally. And also with a mindset of how can I make it, especially when they come from the West, how can I make it Shari? How can I be part of that and build something for the future? And that's why we try to say, hey, you know what? This technology is there. Blockchain is there. Cryptocurrency, whatever you name it, and AI is there. How can we step in? How can we encourage Shabab, young people, Muslim, to build it? What I see, things that are crazy happening, is non-Muslim actually trying to build Sharia compliance product now, and in the right way sometime. And they're like, I want to do it because I see a market, I see a demand, I see this. How come we are still? And again, just coming up from Singapore, it was a lack of entrepreneurship, willingness, and skill. Can you please, because you have a big young audience, Rakan, and I want to know from you and what you think about that and how your audience react to this progress.
That's great. I mean, I'm very optimistic about the Muslim world. I believe the next 100 years will be, a Muslim century, inshallah. And I think that we have so much talent in the Muslim world that will start, appearing more and more and becoming more and more prominent. I think entrepreneurship is something that young Muslim men and women are really open to. It's, I think, exciting for the younger generation, the possibilities. There's no limit to exactly how large a company can get, and therefore no limit to the impact it can have, and no limit to the financial rewards of success when it comes to entrepreneurship. So And there's nothing wrong with that so long as you're building something that's useful for other people. You're providing a product or service that's useful for other people. So that said, a lot of times, the 9 to 5 job is looked down upon in this sort of new age of social media influencers, and basically, giving the idea that, a 9 to 5 is basically a scam or what have you. And this is not true. 9 to 5 is actually can be, an extremely advantageous position to be in. Entrepreneurship is extremely tiring, and actually, on average, 9 to 5 workers, employees make more than entrepreneurs do on average. But you don't hear about the average. You hear about the breakout successes. That said, if someone has that itch, the entrepreneurship itch, then this is something that the Ummah really needs. So I would definitely encourage Muslim youth to really look at entrepreneurship and pursue it. But in their mind, it should be, okay, what is the problem that I'm trying to solve, as opposed to, that should be the starting point, as opposed to, how can I make the most money? If you start with the question, what is the problem I'm going to solve, then you end up with the most amount of money. If you start with the question, how can I make the most amount of money, typically you end up with suboptimal results. So it's important that the motivation be very clear, is that, okay, there's a problem here that I'm trying to solve. If you do that, then you'll be rewarded, inshallah. And if your intention is pure in this life and the next, the reward will be, inshallah.
I wanted to maybe add another layer to this, which is a lot of Muslims, they don't enter into this space, especially the space of innovation, because our scholars are not really in step with us. And a lot of what we try to do is immediately or very quickly deemed haram. And it becomes a big impediment for people to try new things. And what can we do there? I mean, how can we, the scholars, mashallah, they are rewarded for their role, and they are absolutely needed as protectors of the ummah. But at the same time, it causes us to fall behind. And I go back to the earlier point, which was that we used to be the leaders in innovation, and today we are just consumers. And I think a lot of it has to do because our scholars are not really keeping up with what's going on. And how can we get to the point where we are in lockstep, and that they are understanding what we're doing and not trying to they're not trying to haram things. Obviously, they're just doing they're just going off what they know. But I think we really need to up the game over there on how can we get them to be up to speed with technological innovation. What do you guys think?
I have my own opinion, but I will let Rakaan first explain. But I have tendency to disagree a little bit with Sharon. They are very up to the game, and they really understand what's happening. You have to understand the greater mashala. So meaning the scholar, they are not like us, quick to react. Okay, they take big time. Okay, and I don't want to take real example. I could go on, for example, to talk about why the scholar, for example, when they see a population reacting to a ruler and trying to overthrow a ruler because they don't feel comfortable and so on and so forth, the scholar right away say, no, be patient. The ruler will come from the great people that you're going to produce and change the ruling state of what's happening in your status. So basically, the Ummah will not change until you change yourself, within yourself. So the scholar actually have a very, very long vision and understanding, and they are not overreacting. So for example, even when we talk about cryptocurrency, I didn't hear too many fatwa against it. Actually, they were silent to show that nothing was wrong with it yet, and needed it more information. And the people who are doing research and bringing research to them, those scholars are able to assess with the good, the bad, and the ugly, and make a general statement. So for them at the beginning, which was not bad, they were like, stay away from something that could be harmful to the Ummah, the like of FTX and everything, because even us as a Web3 community, we know there's a lot of bad apple there trying to bag into the masakin or bag into the people who don't know anything regarding this technology and this kind of things. So the position is that stay away, or I'm not going to say or enact any fatwa against it, but the silent is already a willingness to say, go ahead and try. By being silent, they let you experience things. Okay, except for few who just mention it, and that's their own position. That's fine. We respect the position as well, but the majority stay silent. That's one thing. So they are not unaware, because if they fall unaware of the general whatever it is, technology, way of living, and so on and so forth, financial and everything, Islam embrace and accept everything. So the scholars are really well aware. This is what I want to say. They are not unaware. Actually, they are studying so much, but they are not quick to react like we will do as a layman, because they have a foresight. Okay, foresight on what's happening. So this is one of the things. So, of course, you have example where we're talking about the printing press during the Ottoman Empire. They had also their own reason. The reason was like, oh, you have less hasanat by not doing it by hand. It's like walking through the masjid by foot or by car, and you get more ajar. All these kind of things. And over time, we realize even by car, you get the same ajar, or even so. This is not the way. So I want to restate that the scholar, they're really aware of what's happening, but the way they position themselves is with hikmah, patience, and for the greater good of the ummah. That's my 2 cents on that. I don't know, Rakan, if you can enlighten me on that and help me out with that.
I respect that opinion. I have a kind of different opinion. I I think that there's too much reliance on scholars in the Ummah to do our thinking for us. You mentioned the printing press. That was just one example where over reliance on scholars was tragic for the Ummah and caused us to fall behind other nations. I think that the entire concept of Rijal ad-Din is something that is not part of the Islamic faith. This is not something that we're not like Catholics, right? We don't have a pope. I'm talking about Sunni Islam here. We don't have people who have divine guidance among us. We don't have that. We have people who pursue scholarship, and really good ideas can come from anywhere. No one has a monopoly on good ideas. And therefore, I think Muslim Ummah needs to stop sort of delegating its duty to think to a very select number of people, and instead people should start educating themselves and being vocal about their assessments of different issues. And eventually, if the Ummah comes together on a certain issue, I think they'll arrive at the right conclusion. But it's kind of like decentralization, right? It's the same concept. So when you have the decision concentrated in very few spots, you're at risk of corruption. You're at risk of bad judgment. You're at risk of uh, someone just getting it wrong. But the more decentralized the decision-making process is, the less risk of these things. And therefore, I think that we need to make sure that more and more of our ummah feel a sense of responsibility to seek knowledge and implement it. If you went to, and then this is an extreme example, but consider the following mental experiment. When Islam came, what were the response of the people who rejected Islam? The response was, هذا ما وجدنا عليه آباءنا. This is our scholars, this is what they told us, right? This is what we found. We have no habit of thinking for ourselves, and this is what we follow. And it's therefore the people who had the mentality of I'm going to follow other people that ended up rejecting Islam. It's only the people that thought for themselves, that had the habit of thinking for themselves, that were able to actually find the truth. And so I think having the habit of thinking for yourself is part and parcel of the Islamic faith, and it's not something that we emphasize enough.
Yeah, I mean, look, again, when it comes to the fundamental of the religion, alhamdulillah, I think things are cleared, and people they have very different of opinions, and they have some kind of jama'ah, so they follow the main Sunni or block in terms of the madhab and the way of practicing. When it comes to innovation and of course technology, there's more room actually for innovation, bid'ah, which is not acceptable in our basis of practical religion. So when it comes to that point where innovation comes, we have maybe a responsibility as like you mentioned, some of the leaders, they will say, stay away from social media, stay away from AI, stay away from that. The reality is that if the world is moving now in social media, and that's what we face now, people are spending so much time, and the biggest consumer of social media channel and tools are the Muslim. They're the biggest segment of the population using YouTube. Again, the fact of don't touch it, don't use it, we end up being just a consumer. Eventually, if we would have stepped in and built our own channel like the Chinese did with their own Google, their own YouTube, their own whatever, you would have ownership of your own technology, and you can purify it with halal content and avoiding all the haram that is in it. Okay, so in that respect, yes, agree with you that we should continue to innovate, but stay always in contact with the scholar to ask them for, hey, what do you think this product or this this use case of that could imply. And most of the time, to be honest, most of the scholar, the alim, they have no objection on technology. They're like, wow, that's good, could help actually the ummah. I was talking to one scholar regarding metaverse. The first thing he was saying is like, wow, you can have a da'wah in the metaverse and helping the ummah and the young people while they're playing game, learning about their religion. So you see, it is not any, except for a few who would mention, no, you should not touch it. I think they are really aware, like I say to Shireen, I know they are really aware of what's happening. I was surprised, and they are not that young, and still they're getting.
I'm just imagining these floating avatars giving out like leaflets in the metaverse.
Yeah.
The hour in the metaverse.
I think it's a quick way to become the least popular character on the metaverse.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but again, as I say, they are not unaware. It's how you use it at the end of the day, how you use the technology. If you're going to use it in a haram way or a good way, at the end of the day, the fundamental itself of the technology is halal, is pure, is how you make the use of it. Okay, and how fast the haram can happen and the halal can happen. That's what we have to look at, and that's why I have this discussion. I'm not, like I say, I respect the elders. This is part of our religion, and I respect also the alim, and take from them. And again, things happen in the past and stuff like that. But again, it was just a fatwa. May Allah bless them with whatever fatwa they make at the time and reward them. And if they were wrong, they still get the reward anyway, because the intention was really to protect the Ummah, to protect. So it was not an evil intention. But alhamdulillah, that's a good point to raise here. Sharon, go ahead.
Yeah, I
You
want
had
to
something?
suggest maybe another way here. So we really need to sit with the scholars and be close to them, like us, the innovators, right? And to have this open dialogue. I mean, the scholars, they are. uh, This is a unique point in time where technology is moving much faster than anyone can catch up, and where entrepreneurship has become incredibly important in the fabric of society in a way that was not the case before. Before you had traders and stuff, but they were never really very, very influential. They were part of just, every other working Joe. But today, entrepreneurs have come to the forefront, and the innovations that they have brought with them are changing the world. And the scholars not being close to that group of people, that is a great injustice to the Ummah. And I think they're just starting to realize this. Because we know of scholars here that, mashallah, in Saudi Arabia, they send their students of knowledge to go and learn. But it's not the students of knowledge who should come and report back to the scholars, it's the innovators themselves. So I'm thinking at some point we really need to start sitting with them and have regular contact. And that's when you have, more enlightened views about different things. Because yes, they're not people who don't know, and they're actually among the most intelligent people in the world. That's why they were chosen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But they lack the information. And this is the role that we have to play. And I think it is incumbent upon us to try at least, to pass the information that way. But anyway, let me now change gears a little bit. I want to learn more about PIF, about Practical Islamic Finance. So I actually collected questions from the team. I was like,
Sure.
okay, what do you want to ask Rakan? So I guess the number one question was that we are navigating choppy waters right now. Islamic banking is not Islamic banking. Crypto is full of problems as well. There's no clear path. What do we as Muslims do? What simple thing can we do to protect our wealth and hopefully to grow, inshallah?
Interesting. It's a good question. Although there are, many sort of pitfalls that one should try and stay clear of, there's probably more opportunity today than there ever was in terms of investing in a halal way. I think equities should be top of list. So, public companies, whether that's in, in the West or other emerging economies. I think public equities, so long as they're traded so long as they're regulated, so as we don't have an FTX situation. So long as the companies are regulated by a reputable source, then I think public equities is perhaps the easiest way for the most number of Muslims to invest their way to invest their money in a way that's profitable, inflation protecting, and inshallah halal. I think cryptocurrencies, I would focus on cryptocurrencies that have utility, that are focused on utility, that people are using for reasons other than speculating on price. Cryptocurrencies, certain projects, or specifically, I would say proof of work cryptocurrencies, things like Bitcoin, Litecoin, and yes, even Dogecoin, I think have potential. And then, as it relates to perhaps the next most common asset class, real estate. I think there's a lot of space for innovation in this field, especially as it relates to crowdfunding real estate that could actually yield positive results for Muslims. I think there's a lot of room for entrepreneurship in this space. And then finally, I would say, especially with regards to the youth, the most important investment that they can make is an investment in themselves, right? So increasing their skills, increasing their income earning potential is by far what's going to impact the most their wealth, much more than the things that they invest in if their income is low. So, I often come across people who have, $500 to their name, and yet they spend, uh, countless hours per year thinking about where they're going to invest their money. And it's like, what's the return on that investment? It's like you're being paid, I don't know, 50 cents per dollar that 50 cents per hour that you spend, trying to, organize your portfolio in an optimal way. It would be much more useful for someone who has a low income to think, how can I increase my income, as opposed to where am I going to invest my money? So I think the number one thing for Muslims, especially younger Muslims, to think about is, how am I going to increase my income? And then once they have, a steady stream of income, a healthy stream of income, they have excess over their expenses, then I think one should think about where to invest my money.
I cannot help myself but to go back to this point about cryptos. You talked about regulated projects. You were saying you want to go and work with companies that are regulated. So, what is your opinion on DeFi, on decentralized finance, which is generally not regulated, but is also much more transparent and much more safe than the centralized regulated projects? Because at the end of the day, FTX was regulated. They had the correct licenses, but they weren't properly regulated.
Yeah, they were in the Bahamas for a reason, right? I think they're prior to the Bahamas, they were in Hong Kong. They moved to the Bahamas, quote unquote, because of favorable regulatory environment, which we later found out what that meant. But as it relates to DeFi, I'm not really convinced that it is as decentralized as it kind of promotes itself to be. I think in most cases there's, a party that is behind whatever, project we're talking about. So I haven't really come across a DeFi project that, isn't basically a company. That is just operating in the sort of DeFi space. So I wouldn't really trust them. I have zero money in the DeFi space, and it appears that many, and I say many, which doesn't mean all, but many, are simply variations of Ponzi schemes, right? So some of them are more complex than others. But if you try to simplify the process to its core, it ends up looking like a pyramid, right? So, yeah, it's something that people should, tread carefully when you're in that space.
I think I'm going to have to push back on that, because the whole point of a DeFi project or a decentralized project is that the code is what determines what happens. So, and there's no central point of failure, meaning once something is launched, a smart contract is launched on a blockchain, it cannot be changed, right? And that smart contract is open source and everybody can see it. So you're coming in and you're willingly participating in this, which now nobody can go and change behind your back or something, and that causes you to fail. And that's where that trust and that transparency comes in, right? And yes, I granted you need to be able to read the contract and things like that. But then let's say that there are enough people who have vetted this thing to say that, okay, this does exactly what it's supposed to do, and there is no central control. That, as you started our podcast with, you mentioned that the centralization is where things fail because there's some self-interest in it. It doesn't mean that the individual who launched the contract cannot benefit, but that benefit is made clear to the people who are participating. And this is very much like Islamic finance, and in our domain, right, like takaful. We say to the people, we are the ones creating the project. We will take a wakala fee. It is going to be this much. And then everything else is actually owned by the community. So there is a profit And it's not like yani fi sabilillah, it's not like everything is for everybody and we take nothing. But at the same time, it is decentralized in that we cannot change it anymore. Once that thing is out there, it's a smart contract, it's immutable, hence the blockchain, and we are no longer in control of it. So this is maybe where I mean when I say, well, the DeFi projects are actually more trustworthy than what is regulated.
Yeah, I mean, I struggle to see why, with smart contracts, as you mentioned, it's basically irreversible. What happens, happens. I struggle to see how that's advantageous for the customer who, is prone to making a mistake. Let's say you did something, you made a mistake. There's no one to call. There's no one to reverse that transaction. Your money is gone. I struggle to see how that's actually providing utility or solving problems for people. I could be wrong.
Actually, you guys made a good point on both sides. You have the extreme decentralized network. That again, there's always a touch point, and as mentioning, the technology is evolving into more decentralized mean. But if you touch at one point the money, it becomes centralized somehow. So I had a debate with different technologists when they say at the end of the day, if you're using a centralized let's say Amazon or Google cloud, you become centralized, even though you're decentralized by definition.
That's
So
true.
what's happening here? You have a mix of both. Okay, mix of both, where you have decentralized. The best is to have a pure decentralized technology where everybody is managed by a smart contract that can protect everybody based on the code. The code is the law. The code is unfireable and stuff like that. That makes sure that when an event happens, there's something happening to benefit both parties. Okay, I'll take an example. I mean, and you're right. When, by the way, Rakan, when you talk about what has been going on for a long time into the Web3 space, there were a lot of nonsensical things happening, but it doesn't mean that we have to leave everything and not build
Right.
on it and take what is good. I give you an example. You heard about the Jam'iyya concept, which is a turn group concept, where people come together and put money together to help one another for micro lending. Okay?
Sure.
In a physical world, you will go to your friend, your relative, and you will have a group of people you trust that you can have like I would say a social effect with one another, that they make sure every payment get paid on a monthly basis with the people you know and trust. Over time, during the time of my mother, fathers, and stuff like that, alhamdulillah, they trusted the community. As the community grow, you have your cousin that you trust maybe less because you haven't seen them for a while, and they come to this Jam'iyya concept. Again, it's physical. You get together, and then you don't get paid because the guy lost his job and he apologized and so on and so forth. And you hear a horror story where people doing multiple Jam'iyya and they scam people on the real life basis. So the scam is always relevant at any given time, even in the real life cases. So when you now bring some kind of technology trust instead of just a WhatsApp group, and you say, I'm going to manage this turn group through a smart contract. When this happen. So you bring kind of tranquility, safety into this kind of transactional settlement, I would say. If you fail to pay, there will be a backup and this will happen. And that's where we are talking about having a such a centralized means of doing things, and where technology can help eliminate, bring peace into the marketplace and make things happen. You see, at that kind of level, Rakan, you got my point. It's not like you're going to have an overnight perfectly decentralized world where everything is managed by smart contract only like that. It's taking step by step, and that's where we kind of trying to use this kind of technology that can reduce the cost of issuing a loan, get access to less fortunate people who don't have access to micro lending and stuff like that. So those kind of real use case that bring inclusivity, if I may say this word, to general masses and bring trust again, could be something of a relevance. Can you see where I'm
Sorry,
coming
sorry.
from? Yeah.
I hate to pile on, but I have to anyway. You made a point that you fail to see how somebody who's made a mistake and lost his money because the smart contract is immutable is beneficial. And I just want to say that in regards to that, there really is a balance, right? So in the real world, if you had cash and I know you lost it or it got stolen, tough, right? That's that. It happens. This is life. It happens. Um, Now, in particular with smart contracts and cryptocurrency, what we're saying is we would rather be the ones to be responsible for our money and lose it because we made a mistake than have it taken away because a centralized authority like a government decides so, which has happened multiple times in the past and especially was very critical during COVID. So if the example of the truckers whose bank accounts were frozen because they were, I don't know, stuck at the border and they refused to move. There are examples of again, people in Venezuela. This was from our earlier podcast where the banks completely refused to let people withdraw their money during COVID. So people were getting paid, but they couldn't access their salaries. There's of course Lebanon, where overnight they decided the dollars become, what was it called, laras or something, where it's
Leras, yeah.
halas, these dollars are gone. They're not yours anymore. So I think there is a balance there. So yes, on the one hand, there is a risk of, okay, if I take my possession and custody of my own money, I may lose it. But it's better that I'm the one who caused it than, just having it arbitrarily taken away from me.
Yeah, my
Yeah,
commentary
go
was
ahead.
actually not about decentralized tokens or cryptocurrencies. Rather, my comment was about smart contracts. My feeling is that it's largely a solution in search of a problem to solve. So, for example, even the example of a jam'iyya or something like that, I think that the solution to that would just be having an escrow, right? So people would put an escrow, and then and I think there are online services, Web2 online services that provide this. Like, I don't necessarily think that you need a blockchain to handle that, or immutable, one-way contracts like smart contracts in order to, make it work smoothly. I'll give you an example. So I came here to Turkey, and I was looking for a place to stay for a month, and I used Airbnb, right? And so some issue happened with the person that I was renting from, and we ended up going back to Airbnb to solve the issue, right? There's an intermediary. There's this third party, a third trusted party that can settle a dispute that happens. I think that's invaluable. I would not come to a country and do a smart contract one way with someone that I don't know without a third party to be able to resolve disputes if and when they arise. And I think that that's really the challenge that most services that are built on smart contracts encounter, is that well, when you're doing your business there, it's just you better not make a mistake. And how is that superior to the experience you have when there is a trusted third party that can actually accommodate you in case you're human and you made a mistake? So yeah, that's why I think that fundamentally a lot of these sort of Web3 projects that are out there are solutions in search of a problem. I think there is a problem that cryptocurrency does help with, and that is the issue of money. But I really haven't seen anything sort of outside of that that has been solved as of yet. This is not to say this is the sort of end of the road, as Murad said, but I think we need to be very clear about where we are.
I just wanted to touch on this. I think the problem here is that the escrow and the centralized entity that you're relying on to resolve the issues is the problem. And this is why I bring up government, because government is the ultimate escrow in every scenario, right? Because that's where you go sue people if something goes wrong. And back to your example, the Airbnb, There's a no discrimination policy on Airbnb. So you cannot actually, as an Airbnb owner, if you're renting your house, say, well, I only want Muslims who don't drink alcohol in my platform. So then it becomes, you've lost that power, that autonomy. And this is, I think, the point that decentralization comes to solve. And yes, it's not for every single use case. There is complexity in the world, which sometimes you need a third party. But with very simple transactions like what's happening on the blockchain today, which is mostly related to money, these are the things that I think is most applicable there. Okay, I think I need to give a final word and a final shout out to Practical Islamic Finance. I actually want to know how exactly we can benefit from you. How is it that we can? What is your business model, and how is it that we can, participate in your community?
Well, absolutely. So there are two services that we offer. The membership service, PIF membership service, basically shares with our members what we're investing in and the different assets that we do deep dives in and our opinion on them, whether that's stocks or cryptocurrencies. So that's sort of the analogy is giving people fish. And then the other service is basically the Mastering Halal Investing course, which I teach, which basically teaches people how to fish. So we have the membership that gives people fish. We have the course that teaches people how to fish on their own. And you can find more information on practicalislamicfinance.com.
Thank you so much for this. Murad, any last
Absolutely.
words? Or any last questions?
No, thank you so much for having us and having you on the platform. It was great. I think it was an interesting debate, discussion. There's much more that will be evolving into that space. I'm happy to have more people changing the thought on the subject, and we are still at the beginning of this revolutionary technology, and let's see how this evolves, inshallah. And I invite everybody to check Rakaan YouTube channel as well and share his knowledge with the community. Thank you again, guys. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.